Alright, statistics part 2 here. So we just barely got done talking about how we find a standard deviation. So now what we're looking at is what would all this look like if we were to graph it out. So if I were to make a simple graph, and let's say my middle point is going to be my average. The idea here is that given a number of, or a specific test ran over and over and over again, we should see what we call a normal distribution of values, meaning that the value I get most and the value that occurs most often, and that is also the average, should be this middle number, or this mode, median, mean, median, and mode should all be the same. Now the idea is if I go out one standard deviation in both directions, I know I'm going to have a certain percentage of tests that fall, or percentage of values that fall within that one standard deviation. Likewise, if I go out two standard deviations, a certain percentage of my values are going to fall, and these are negative standard deviations, into that area. And again, if I go out three standard deviations, I'm going to find a certain percentage of values out there. So if I look at this, if I'm talking within plus or minus 1 standard deviation, we're going to find that about 68.3% of all the values will fall into that group. Going out 2 standard deviations, we're going to find that about 95.5% fall in there. And if I go out the full 3 standard deviations, I'm going to find that about 99.7% of all my values are going to fall within plus or minus 3 standard deviations. So, in the lab, the magic number is typically 2 standard deviations. So if I have a glucose control that's 100 milligrams per deciliter, and I know that my standard deviation is 2, then I can find my range by simply going plus and minus 2 standard deviations. So if my standard deviation value was 2 here, then 2 standard deviations would be just 2 times 2 would be 4. So now I'm looking at plus or minus. So minus would be my average, or what I'm trying to get here, minus 4, which would give me 96, and then that 100 plus my 2 standard deviations, which would be plus 4. So the range that I would be looking for would be 96 to 104 milligrams per deciliter. And that would be what we would consider the acceptable range for this control.